Please help me welcome to the stage Miss Madison Paige, who has been doing a wonderful job with the videography, helping with the live streaming and the photography. She has been doing triple duty for us for this conference, and I'm truly appreciative for her stepping in, especially when certain folks couldn't make it. You know, this is how we pull together, and I really appreciate that. So Madison is the founder and CEO of Bold Blue Campaigns, the nation's only grassroots supported campaign consultancy dedicated to the success of Democratic state and local candidates nationwide. She is also the founder and director of People Over PACs, which is a hybrid PAC that is home to the Action Syndicate and the 5-Point Power Acquisition Plan for the American Left. And finally, she is the author of the upcoming book, Punching Nazis, the plan to end the Republican Party. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Madison Paige.
Well, that was an interesting introduction, but thank you very much. It actually came right off my website. So thank you so much. And thank you for being here. And I hope you're all having a fantastic time. I'm loving this. Thank you so much, Mandisa, for what you've done here. This is incredible. So I thought we might have a little fun today. And I want to do a thought experiment with you. When the organizers of this event originally asked me to speak, it was in 2020. We were supposed to do this in 2020. And of course, as you know, 2020 is a big election year. And I was supposed to come in as a person in the political space and talk about all the things that are going on in 2020. But 2020 had other plans. And so, of course, they approached me again this time, and I was happy to do it. But I was faced with a challenge when I accepted this opportunity. And that challenge was, what do I say to a room full of Black women who are already actively engaged in political and social justice activities in their communities? Like, what am I going to say that you haven't heard 6,000 times? And that's when I made the decision that I thought it would be good to play with some ideas that perhaps you haven't had an opportunity to think a lot about. So what we're going to do today is we are going to talk about, and I want you to imagine with me, how we should be organizing and preparing our communities for a post-democracy America. I know that that's sort of a heavy topic, and it's a scary one to think about. So I want to thank you in advance for being brave enough to take this ride with me. But I don't think that we can afford to not think about worst case scenarios. So some of you know me and some of you don't. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm going to give you a little brief rundown of who I am and what I'm about and why you should even listen to me at all. My political work, I'm involved in a lot of things, but my political work really started in 2008 when I was an official area liaison for the Obama campaign in Central Florida in my county. And one of the things that really was an exciting experience, but one of the things that really sort of disturbed me was that I noticed that there were so many other people running that nobody was paying attention to. There were school board candidates, and there were city commission candidates, and there were county council candidates, and there were judges, and there were House candidates and Senate candidates in the state level that nobody was paying attention to. Now, unfortunately for me, I was in charge of 300 volunteers, and I made them talk about other candidates besides Barack Obama. But that stuck with me because 90% of the things that happen to you in your life, and you know this, I don't have to tell you this, the governing that happens that affects people's lives is happening in their communities and in their states. And we can see this more starkly than ever now with the COVID, right? We can see that certain states, it's crazy because of who's in charge. And other states, a little less crazy because of who's in charge. And even areas within states, right? Depending on who's in power. So state and local politics is a passion of mine. It's important. And I've spent 8 years at Bold Blue campaigns, working with candidates all across the country. Because a lot of these lower profile candidates, they don't have a lot of money. They can't hire big consultants and people that help them. So they're not running strong, credible campaigns. I'm really proud of the work that we've done since 2013. But one of the things that I also noticed during that period of time, there were some systemic and foundational problems that we were having that were causing it to be more difficult for local candidates and state candidates, and even for the top level candidates to run. There were a lot of ingrained things that were already there that were making it harder for them to overcome and get people to actually vote for us. And I decided, since I love intractable problems, I decided to figure out how to fix that too. I spent the year 2019 and a portion of 2020 studying the Republican Party. How is it that this party that is actually numerically a minority in this country, right? How do they have so much power? How have they maintained so much power over the last 100 years? It's not just the last few years. This has been going on since FDR. How is it that on the left, we just get these little momentary blips of power? But overall, we're still always fighting back. We're always on the defense. How is it? So I took some time and I studied them. So what are they doing? How do they do this? And I deconstructed it. And what I did was I came up with what I call my 5-point power acquisition plan for the American left. I basically took what they did and I adapted it for us on the left and our culture. And I wrapped it up in a super PAC called People Over PACs. And I went out to try to garner support for these foundational things that I felt like needed to be occurring. Now, 2020 was a tough year to do that because everybody was focusing on the presidential election and nobody really wanted to talk about how are we going to deal with messaging? How are we going to deal with finding 40% of people who don't vote? How are we going to deal with ALEC? What do we do? How can we do that? Nobody wanted to talk about that. So I waited it out. And after the election, I talked to more people and more people. And I have to report to you that unfortunately, I was not able to garner the support that I needed to execute on that plan. So being a strategist, the next thing that I thought was, okay, well, we about to die. What do we do next? This is going down. What do we do? How do I prepare for disaster? This is like, you're on the plane and the oxygen mask falls and you're trying to figure out how you tuck your head between your legs so you maybe survive a crash. That's where I'm at. And that's what we're going to talk about today. It's scary, and I know it's scary. But we have an American right, and we've all witnessed over the last 4 years, with no respect for the Constitution, no respect for any kind of law or order. We've watched a complete dismantling of all of the systems that we thought were reliable. And we've also watched elected officials not say a thing about it. I mean, just literally silence. And they're still doing it. And this political party is largely run by religious extremists. They have made they've made their ideology and their religious extremism married. They've taken something that people believe in very deeply, which is their religion, and they've connected it to an ideology so that now they believe as strongly in that ideology as they do in their religion. It's almost unbreakable. So the question we have to ask on the left is, how do we prepare? What should we be doing in our communities? What do we do to prepare for a potential disaster? Now, early in September, Dana Milbank over at the Washington Post wrote an opinion piece. And he said, if you want to know what America will look like under Republican rule, take a look at Texas. I would add Florida, But I would also add Mississippi and Oklahoma and Nebraska and South Dakota, and I would add every single red state, because they're all doing the same thing, because that's what Republicans do. They try it in one place, and if it works, they do it everywhere. That's where we're at, y'all. That's where we're at. And we are one House and Senate election away from very serious consequences, and also a presidential election away. There are no guarantees. So we're going to take a little thought experiment, and this is the beginning of a long conversation. Clearly, we are not going to solve this problem in this 15 or 20-minute conversation. This is the beginning of a conversation. So I would actually urge anyone who wants to continue this conversation to visit my website, strategicextremist.com. Get on my mailing list, because I will be continuing this conversation. But today we're going to start that conversation. We will, in the future, we will need to be talking about things like co-living, resource sharing, income sharing, anti-work, anti-capitalism, mutual aid. We're going to be having those conversations, and we're going to be having to figure out how do we organize, how do we put ourselves together in our communities to get there. But today, I want to urge you, I'm going to give you something that you can begin to do in your communities today, as soon as you get home. In part because you're already doing a lot of this already. In the history of humankind, I'm not talking about like 200 years ago or 1,000 years ago. I'm talking about since human beings were like human beings. Like in the history of humankind, one thing is true. And that one thing is that we get further and have greater survivability when we cooperate, when we are working together, when we collaborate. And anybody here who's ever gone through a disaster, a hurricane, a tornado, an earthquake, anything like that, you know what happened in your community when that happened, right? People weren't at each other's throats. They were working together. And this is our legacy as human beings. So in order for us to begin to think about how we might survive in a post-democracy in America, and a system in which the systems that we've relied on, the courts, voting, because those systems may not be around. If Republicans get back in power, they're going to begin to change the courts. And the other thing they'll do is they'll continue to disenfranchise. They're already at work doing both of those. They will make felons of people so that you can't vote. That was what the drug war was all about. That's a lot of what this abortion bill is all about. So we're not talking about stuff that they haven't already done. They know how to do it, and they're doing it well. The question is, how do we survive it? And that is, the way we do that is by beginning to go back into our communities and creating genuine connection between one another, because we are going to rely on one another. And in order to do that, we have to know each other, and we have to care about each other. I mean, personally, right? This is a switch for the left, because normally we on the left have this fear. We work to make systems better. Our orientation is the systems are in place, but we need to make them better. All of our energy, activism, and our attention and money goes to making systems better so that it benefits as many people as possible. And on the right, they're the ones that are like, oh, the systems are all screwed up. We could be doing it alone. We're going to need to reorient ourselves a little bit and think about, how do we survive with a system that's openly hostile to us, that is not designed to work? And I think as Black people, and particularly as Black women, we are uniquely situated to be able to answer those questions, because we understand more than anyone else a system that's always been set up for us to fail and for us to have to fight it just to get a little bit of what. We are uniquely situated to address those questions. So there's a unique space for us here. Now, I'm not going to talk about the religio-fascist right and its counterpart on the left, which is Christian religion, We have a lot of Black folks that are still in there, and there's some points of agreement between their agendas. And we don't know if they'll be trustworthy in a disaster. But that's another conversation. Again, please go to my website, Strategic Extremists. Get on my mailing list. We're going to have this conversation because we got to figure out how all this fits together. But the first thing you can do is to go back into your community and begin to create collaborative networks.